Zelda is one of my favorite video game franchises ever. Every Zelda game has marvelous soundtrack, amazing gameplay, amazing graphics, beautiful storyline, and epic bosses. Well, almost every Zelda game. Now, I'm going to count down the 14 greatest Zelda games. I haven't played any of the spin-offs. I haven't played Crossbow Training because I found no reason to play it. And I want to play Four Swords, but I can't because I have to find 3 other people to play it, and I can't find many people to play it with. I haven't played the CDIs either because from what I hear, they're absolute garbage. I've only played the regular Zeldas, so I will count all 14 of them from worst to best. To start off the list, I'd have to put my least favorite entry in the series, which is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. It was the only reason I delayed my top 14 Zelda games list, but it was complete garbage. You'd probably know I hated this game if you saw my status music list. One thing I hated was the graphics. They tried to combine Wind Waker and Twilight Princess's graphics into one, but the outcome wasn't really good. The graphics are a horrible blend. Second, the flight system. The way it is executed, jumping off a cliff to summon the Loftwing will poison little kids' minds into thinking that if they jump off a cliff, they'll be rescued by a Loftwing, leading to a lot of child suicides. I know this because Nightwing01 mentioned it in his Let's Play. But there's more. Instead of feeling awesome and atmospheric like it should, flying on the Loftwing feels completely cliched. The storyline combines 2 overused cliches into one. First, you have to save Princess Zelda for the bazillionth time, and the other cliche involves you having to stop a bad guy from resurrecting an even greater threat that could wreak havoc on the world. Because, you know, that's a completely original concept, and totally hasn't been done to death already. And you'll love this. That annoying Fee, sometimes instead of telling you useful stuff, she'll tell you completely obvious stuff like, oh, you're low on HP, even when it's obvious by the beeping noise and how Link is flashing red. Now, Lupina09 did say in her list of the best video game sidekicks that it was the gamer's fault for that. Yeah, because it's our fault that Fee is the one telling us the most obvious things in the world when she should be telling us the less obvious stuff. I respect Lupina09, but I have to disagree with her on that one. My final verdict? I hate this game. It's fine that people like it, but I hated it. I'm going to be perfectly honest here. Even though Zelda 2 is only at number 13, I still think it's a great game. It's not a masterpiece like the rest of the franchise, but it's still wonderful. Yes, it's frustratingly difficult, but it introduced side-scrolling to the Zelda franchise, and even though you can't use bombs, arrows, boomerang, etc., it introduces a magic meter. It also gives more sword moves aside from just a neutral stab and sword shoot move. It also introduced towns and houses, like the author said. The caves came a long way from what they were in the original Zelda because they're much bigger and loaded with enemies. Many people say there's no nostalgia in the game, but I think the game is pretty nostalgic. Fight monsters, gain power-up, go through dungeons and solve puzzles, then defeat the boss. That's the classic Zelda formula we know. So, it has more nostalgia than you think it does. It also combines 3 different genres of gaming: RPG, adventure, and platformer. That's very interesting. The Minish Cap. This game lets you be both big and small. The graphics are also beautiful. Why isn't it higher? Well, some of the gameplay can be unmemorable, but when you see a certain part of the game again, the memories will come back to you. And thanks to the Four Sword, you can split into 4 links, which is an awesome concept. It was also the first game in the series to have epic boss battles. Don't get me wrong, they were awesome before, but this was the first one to have extremely epic boss battles. Phantom Hourglass. This game showed us what a Zelda game would be on the DS. You can travel overseas, setting a path you will go on, and there's a tablet you can draw symbols on, which is more fun than it sounds. It also combines the top-down view from the 2D Zeldas, and the third-person view from the 3D Zeldas, which is really good. And you can draw on the map to remember certain things like where treasure chests are. And the soundtrack is surprisingly memorable. It has some of the greatest boss battles on the DS. It also is, in my mind, the most underrated game in the franchise. It's not as good as the later games on the list, but it's a great game. The game that started it all. The idea of going into dungeons and slaying bosses to get the Triforce pieces is just brilliant. If that's not enough for you, it gets better. Despite being an NES game, it actually gives you the ability to save, and you don't have to use that annoying password system. The items are also very enjoyable to use, and the enemies are creative as well. The level design is just fascinating for NES standards, and if that's not awesome enough, I can't imagine what a blast it was back when it first came out. Many games have still surpassed it, but still one of my favorite games of all time. It is my favorite NES game. Link's Awakening. What's not to love about it? May not have much innovation to the Zelda franchise, but it's still great nonetheless. Instead of the usual save Princess Zelda thing, our storyline has Link wash up on Koholint Island, and the only way to get back is to wake the Windfish. And even the mini-bosses are enjoyable. But wait, there's more Zelda games to come. Oracle of Seasons. This game allows you to change the seasons between spring, summer, fall, and winter, which will really help you in this game. Instead of Ganon kidnapping Zelda, Onyx, the General of Darkness, kidnaps Din, the Oracle of Seasons, and Link needs to save her. Subrosia is also a nice region to go through. So, I love this game. I'll admit it's lazy that they reused a lot from Link's Awakening, but overall, it's a great game. And it looks like we're halfway there. It was hard to decide between seasons and ages, but what broke the tie was the story. Instead of that cliched rescue the damsel in distress story, which had already gotten old ever since Super Mario 64, Veron possesses Ambi and goes back to the past and tries to build an evil tower and ruin the Labrynna region. You can also travel through time. Awesome! I didn't find that to be a gimmick. In fact, I found it even better than Link to the Past, because not only could you go forward in time freely, you can also go back in time freely without having to find a certain pad, at least later in the game. I know the Autarch of Flame hated both of these games, but I personally loved them. It's his opinion, he's allowed to hate them, but I loved both of these games. Okay, let's continue. Majora's Mask lets you take on 4 different forms. 1, not counting the Fierce Deity form. Hop on water and burrow into plants as Deku Link. Roll at hyperspeed and have sweet combat moves as Goron Link. And thanks to Zora Link, swimming is no longer a pain. And of course there's the human form. And it has one of the greatest and most emotional side quests ever. Speaking of side quests, they're very creative. Some of them even involve you beating a certain minigame 3 days in a row, all 3 days having different elements to them. This is hands down the most intense game in the franchise, thanks to the 3-day cycle where you have to play the Song of Time on the 3rd day, or else the moon will crash and destroy Termina. It gets closer and closer until... Oh my gosh! top 5 entries on this list are extremely close to being as amazing as each other. Even the number 5 entry on the list is centimeters close to being number 1. The number 5 entry is Spirit Tracks. I love trains, which is one of the big reasons I love Spirit Tracks. Princess Zelda is a ghost in this game, and she can possess phantoms and team up with you. Wow! And it has the best boss fights on any portable Zelda game. The train sequence? Genius! Now, the train sequence doesn't give you as much space to go on the train as on the boat, thanks to the rails, obviously, but you don't need as much space. Besides, it's also slightly simpler to control the train than it is to control the boat. And the soundtrack is even more outstanding. Zelda on the NES may have created the franchise, but Link to the Past is one of the reasons it's one of the greatest franchises of all time, thanks to its amazingly innovative soundtrack and fantastic boss battles. This nearly perfect game is my second favorite game on the Super Nintendo, number 1 being Super Metroid. The light and dark worlds rock, and sometimes the boss is defeated by the main weapon that's found in the dungeon, which, even though Peanut3423 has a problem with that, I actually like it because it's creative, and at least some of the weak spots aren't completely obvious. Without this game, I wouldn't love Zelda nearly as much as I do now. I still love Zelda, but without Link to the Past, it wouldn't be one of my all-time favorite franchises. If you know me from my original account, you'd probably expect Ocarina of Time to be number 1. Well, it's not, because after playing through the top 2 and coming back to Ocarina, it's still very fun, especially the childhood part of the game, but it just felt kind of inferior compared to the other two. But because of how much amazement I had when I first played the game back in the summer of 2008, that's why it's this high on the list. How could it not be this high? Like Nintendo said in his review, this is one of the most innovative games of all time. It has a memorable soundtrack and it makes you feel like you're a part of it. The graphics are incredibly realistic for an N64 game, and without this game, 3D adventures wouldn't be nearly as awesome as they are now. We probably wouldn't even have Kingdom Hearts. This game is one of the best games ever, and it is the best game on the N64 in my mind. I know that some people find it overrated, and I understand why, but I love this game. But here's my suggestion. Don't play the later Zelda games until after you played Ocarina of Time. That's just my suggestion. Trust me, you may love the game if you play Ocarina of Time before the later games. Wind Waker is definitely the most beautiful game in the series. The frame rate is perfect. It also has beautiful graphics that are both praised and criticized by fans, but I love the graphics. I mean, how the heck did they make Link actually be dripping wet when he comes out of the water? That must take some serious graphical work. I know that's not much, but still. The explosions are plain awesome. And look at that! You can even see the wind blowing. You can control the wind too. You can't swim forever like you can in other Zeldas, and you can't even dive, but that doesn't matter too much because underwater levels can be really annoying sometimes anyways, and at least the fact that you drown is at least somewhat of a challenge. Sailing across the seas may be repetitive gameplay-wise, but at least it has an amazing view. Enemies are also a joy to fight, especially the ones where you can use their own weapons against them, and you can cut down stuff you weren't able to cut down before. I can clearly see why this is the Author of Flame's favorite Zelda game. It is truly a masterpiece. Only one more game to cover. By now you probably know what game I haven't used yet, but first, let's recap the other 13. Number 14, Skyward Sword. Number 13, Zelda 2. Number 12, Minish Cap. Number 11, Phantom Hourglass. Number 10, the original Zelda. Number 9, Link's Awakening. Number 8, Oracle of Seasons. Number 7, Oracle of Ages. Number 6, Majora's Mask. Number 5, Spirit Tracks. Number 4, Link to the Past. Number 3, Ocarina of Time. Number 2, Wind Waker. There is only one game I haven't covered on this list yet. That is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. It just amazes me that the franchise went from this all the way to this. They grew up so fast. And it has the best graphics in the entire franchise too. The game is also very powerful in terms of emotion. It also has hands down the greatest boss battles in the series. As long as you like fighting Ganondorf on horseback. The music, the most realistic in the franchise. And the dungeons are as challenging as ever. Want to know what amazes me? The game gives you the ability to slice while running, which is just awesome! Why? Let me explain. You know how annoying it is to have to cut down grass constantly to refill on items? Now this ability makes it a breeze. It also has the ability to turn into Wolf Link, where you can sniff out certain things, can run faster, even in dungeons, which rules, especially when you can turn between Wolf Link and regular Link freely. And it's not too bad since it only takes like 2 seconds. Also, Hyrule Field is outright massive, and riding Epona through it feels so good. And that is why Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda game of all time.
Quiet, musical hog. Knock it off.